were announcing that in early 2024, all of Ford's existing customers and future customers will have access to 12,000 Tesla superchargers across the US. Ford just pulled off the boldest move in its history, and no one was ready for it. A free adapter sounded like a PR stunt. Then came the silence, the delays, and the outrage. But behind the scenes, Ford wasn't failing. It was planning a takeover, one that now threatens to flip the entire electric vehicle market. Why did Tesla get blindsided? Why did every competitor fall behind? And why is Ford suddenly doing what the government couldn't? Because by the end of this video, you'll understand this wasn't about innovation. It was about power. What's happening? It began with a promise, old, public, and urgent. In 2023, Ford announced that every qualifying owner of a Mustang Mach-E or F-150 Lightning would receive a complimentary adapter to access the Tesla supercharger network. It was framed as more than a technical upgrade. It was a lifeline. For many customers, this commitment meant that switching to electric wasn't just feasible. It was finally convenient. But as the weeks turned into months and the months gave way to silence, that promise began to corrode. Ford underestimated the emotional weight carried by its early adopters. These were not just customers, they were believers. Many had taken a leap of faith on Ford's electric vision while the market was still skeptical. They endured inconsistent range estimates, early software bugs, charging uncertainty, and infrastructure gaps. And yet they stayed loyal. They trusted that Ford would evolve. So when the company promised an adapter that would open access to the most reliable charging network in North America, it felt like overdue recognition. It felt like Ford was finally catching up. Instead, delays piled up. Tesla, originally set to manufacture the adapter, missed internal delivery timelines, forums filled with customer complaints, phone calls to dealerships went unanswered, rumors swirled. Some owners turned to aftermarket solutions, others gave up entirely. The result was not just disappointment, it was disillusionment. The very people Ford needed to champion its EV future now felt forgotten. That fracture in trust rippled through the community. What was once quiet patience transformed into public frustration. Ford had promised transformation. Instead, it delivered a delay, and in doing so, it invited doubt. Doubt in its timeline, in its reliability, and in its vision. But just when the trust seemed irreparably broken, Ford made a move that stunned even its loudest critics. That's where everything changed. The adapter that changed everything. The solution arrived not as a press conference or a splashy ad campaign, but in a box, shipped to over 140,000 customers across North America. Ford's new charging adapter marked a technical and operational milestone that few in the industry believed they could reach. This wasn't just a fix, it was a statement. Ford was done following. The adapter itself was designed and manufactured, not by Tesla but by Electron, a California-based company specializing in electric vehicle charging equipment. After initial manufacturing timelines slipped, Ford quietly severed its reliance on Tesla for the device and turned to Electron with a clear mission: deliver now. The shift was a logistical gamble. Electron had to scale manufacturing rapidly, test under brutal real-world conditions, and meet Ford's aggressive distribution goals. And they did. Behind the scenes, Ford and Electron engineers worked to create a product that didn't just meet regulatory compliance, it had to survive abuse. The adapter was tested in sub-zero cold and extreme heat. Engineers dropped it, ran it over with electric vehicles weighing nearly 7,000 pounds, and dunked it in over 3 feet of water. One weak point, a latch made from zinc alloy, was redesigned in stainless steel after tests showed it couldn't withstand years of rough handling. The result? An adapter that could survive over 10,000 insertions and 30 minutes underwater without failing. What Ford had created through quiet engineering discipline and external partnership was not just a connector. It was proof that the company could move faster than its past suggested. Proof that it could learn from a mistake and respond decisively. Proof that it was still in this race, not just to compete, but to lead. This adapter didn't arrive because Tesla cooperated. In fact, it arrived because Ford made a move Tesla never saw coming. We spent weeks digging into Ford's internal strategy, charging data, and supplier contracts. If this move changed your view of Ford, drop a comment and hit subscribe. How Ford outsmarted Tesla without a fight. It began with a digital handshake. Jim Farley, Ford's CEO, needed a breakthrough. Tesla's North American charging standard had emerged as the clear winner in the electric vehicle world, and Tesla's supercharger network was by every metric superior. Ford needed access, and Elon Musk wasn't exactly known for playing nice with competitors. At first, Tesla declined. Doug Field, Ford's chief EV and digital officer, and notably a former Tesla executive, had made the initial request. No deal. Tesla wasn't ready to share, but Farley didn't let it die. Instead, he took to X, Musk's own platform, and posted what looked like a compliment. What followed was a string of private texts between Farley and Musk that reshaped the playing field entirely. It was subtle diplomacy disguised as social media banter, and it worked. Eventually, Tesla agreed to give Ford early access to the supercharger network, the first non-Tesla automaker to get such approval. It wasn't just about getting permission. It was about securing an early edge in a market that had only just begun to pivot toward NACS as the new default. Ford didn't wait for regulatory clarity. It didn't ask for a consortium. It didn't pitch a 5-year roadmap. It got on the phone, negotiated the terms, and made the deal. That decision sent shockwaves across the auto industry. Weeks later, other automakers followed, announcing they too would adopt Tesla's standard. But Ford was first, and being first meant Ford had leverage. Leverage to control its own narrative, leverage to shape its adapter rollout, and leverage to bypass the perception that it was always a step behind. Yet the real genius wasn't just the deal, it was what Ford did with the access afterward, building the largest charging network in North America. While headlines focused on Ford's supercharger deal, the company was doing something far more ambitious in the background. It was assembling the largest public charging network on the continent, one built not on ownership, but on access, integration, and simplicity. Ford's Blue Oval charging network is not a fleet of physical stations. It's a cloud-based ecosystem that consolidates partnerships with major charging providers across North America. Through a single interface, Ford Pass, drivers can locate, access, and pay for charging at more than 180,000 stations, including over 44,000 fast chargers. That number represents a 53% increase in fast charging access from just 1 year prior. The brilliance lies in how Ford packaged this access. Through plug-and-charge technology, Mach-E and Lightning drivers can plug into any compatible station and start charging without cards or apps. The vehicle authenticates itself, the charger responds, and billing happens invisibly in the background. But once required phone calls, broken kiosks, and long waits now feels frictionless, and unlike its competitors, Ford made this seamlessness feel personal. It wasn't just about tech, it was about restoring dignity to the public charging experience. A chaotic, unreliable network is enough to push any new buyer back to gas. Ford knew that, so they didn't just give customers more chargers, they gave them confidence. That confidence became the foundation for Ford's next move. Because if it could own the charging experience, not the real estate, but the relationship, it could start controlling the future of its electric platform in a way few had imagined. The question now wasn't whether Ford could catch up. It was whether it could take the lead. When Ford's EV plan nearly collapsed, the headlines never told the full story. While Tesla basked in the glow of Wall Street, and headlines promised a sleek electric future, Ford found itself cornered by its own ambition. 2023 should have been a breakout year. Instead, it turned into a year of cancellations, delays, and internal chaos. Behind closed doors, Ford executives were grappling with a cruel reality. The company wasn't ready. Ford had entered the electric vehicle race with a legacy that carried weight, but that weight became an anchor. The Mustang Mach-E and F-150 Lightning were met with early enthusiasm, but cracks quickly formed beneath the surface. Factory reconfigurations were incomplete, production timelines slipped, battery costs refused to fall, and then came the blow that Ford couldn't spin, a sudden announcement that one electric sport utility vehicle was being cancelled outright, while another was delayed indefinitely. Internally, the message was even bleaker. Supply chains that once supported gasoline-powered models couldn't easily adapt to electric architecture. Global parts shortages collided with a rising wave of internal doubt. Dealers became restless. Customers who had pre-ordered new EVs watched their timelines shift again and again. Meanwhile, Ford's competitors surged ahead, not because they had better cars, but because they had less to lose. Ford wasn't failing because it didn't understand electric vehicles. It was failing because it tried to carry 100 years of manufacturing tradition into a future that demanded speed, flexibility, and reinvention. The company was straddling two worlds, gasoline and electric, without fully committing to either. And for a moment, it looked like the hesitation might cost them everything. But rather than pretend it had everything under control, Ford made a rare decision in the corporate world. It admitted the cracks. Publicly, it began to reposition its electrification strategy. Internally, it refocused not on innovation for the sake of headlines, but on utility and trust. That pivot wasn't born from confidence, it was born from collapse. Just as the pressures seemed unbearable, Ford stopped chasing hype and started solving problems. Power promise that redefined EV ownership. The first sign of that shift didn't come from a press release or a glitzy vehicle reveal. It came in the form of a simple but transformative offer, a free home charger, fully installed, for every retail customer purchasing a 2024 or 2025 Mustang Mach-E, F-150 Lightning, or E-Transit cargo van. Ford promised not just a charger, but the convenience of filling up at home. And that changed everything. The Ford Power Promise was not just a perk, it was a lifeline. For many potential EV buyers, the biggest fear wasn't price, it was practicality. Where would they charge? How long would it take? Would they need to rewire their house, install new panels, or get approval from their landlords? Ford answered those questions not with marketing spin, but with action. The company partnered with Qmerit to handle installation logistics, cutting through the red tape most first-time EV buyers dread. This wasn't just generous, it was strategic. Most Ford EV buyers were switching from gasoline-powered vehicles. They were not early adopters obsessed with cutting-edge technology. They were everyday drivers, people looking for reliability, not experimentation. And Ford spoke directly to them by removing the most intimidating barrier to EV ownership. Even the fine print reflected the strategy's focus. Instead of tucking costs behind dealership upsells or third-party electricians, Ford's terms were straightforward. Customers were eligible whether they financed or leased. No trade-in required, no catch. For the first time, charging at home felt like a basic right, not a privilege wrapped in complexity. It was the kind of move legacy automakers rarely make, meeting the consumer where they are, instead of telling them where to go. And more importantly, it marked a cultural shift inside the company. Ford was no longer trying to impress investors with flashy concepts. It was trying to win over the people who still hesitated at the thought of going electric. While this move earned quiet respect from buyers, it also set off alarm bells inside government buildings and corporate boardrooms alike. The silent war over EV infrastructure. In the same months, Ford was rolling out its home charging promise. The rest of the country was facing a very different reality. The federal government had paused its national EV charging rollout program. Just as demand was beginning to spike, roads that were supposed to be lined with high-speed chargers remained bare. Grant programs slowed, timelines slipped, and worst of all, trust collapsed. A survey from J.D. Power confirmed what many drivers already suspected. In the final 3 months of 2024, 1 in 5 EV drivers had failed to charge at least once due to broken equipment, station outages, or long lines. Some had waited over an hour only to find the charger offline. Others found cables vandalized, or payment systems malfunctioning. What should have been a quick stop turned into a logistical nightmare. Charging wasn't just slow, it was unreliable. Worse, it was becoming dangerous. Tesla began testing a deterrent technology called Dye Defender, a spray designed to mark cable thieves with a blue stain. That's how bad it had gotten. Automakers were now engineering dye cannons to protect public chargers. Meanwhile, city governments hesitated to build more infrastructure without clear federal guarantees. Charging deserts spread across suburbs and rural communities. And for many drivers, especially first-time EV buyers, the dream of electric mobility felt like it was collapsing under its own weight. This was the silent war that Ford had quietly prepared for. While the industry debated policy and waited for funding, Ford moved to remove its customers from the chaos. It wasn't lobbying for new stations. It wasn't waiting for Congress. It was building an escape route, one that didn't rely on politics, patience, or broken public promises. When that escape route hit a roadblock, Ford was quietly picking up the pieces left behind by a rival's decline. The Tesla exodus Ford quietly capitalized on. No press release, no gloating, no viral marketing stunt. Ford simply opened its doors, and thousands of disillusioned EV drivers walked in. As public perception of Tesla began to shift, Ford found itself in the right place at the right time, offering an alternative that felt grounded, stable, and refreshingly apolitical. For many former Tesla owners, the change wasn't about abandoning innovation. It was about finding trust again. Longtime EV enthusiasts who once tolerated hardware quirks and erratic customer service found themselves drawn to something Ford quietly excelled at: consistency. The most powerful shift didn't come from product specs, it came from charging access. Ford's alignment with the nation's most expansive fast-charging network made the ownership experience simple. No new apps to download, no broken third-party stations, just plug in and charge. That level of ease, combined with Ford's expanding support infrastructure, made switching a low-risk, high-comfort move. EV buyers weren't just comparing brands, they were comparing the lifestyles. And in that comparison, Ford offered something that hadn't been associated with EVs before: normalcy. Politics added a second layer to the migration. As tensions around Tesla's public image grew, especially in politically polarized regions, Ford emerged as a more neutral choice. For some buyers, this wasn't just about range or price. It was about brand safety. Ford didn't polarize. It didn't provoke. It just delivered. That restraint, in an age of algorithmic outrage, became its own kind of marketing genius. Buyers tired of drama started whispering a phrase that would have been unthinkable a few years earlier: "Maybe I'll try Ford next." This wasn't just about a switch in vehicles. It was about something deeper. A cultural realignment that pointed to Ford's greatest strength: its identity. The comeback of the American brand. It was never about who could shout the loudest. For decades, Ford built its name on the kind of quiet strength that didn't need a tech demo to prove itself. Blue-collar muscle, work truck reliability, cars that weren't optimized for Twitter virality, but for school runs, job sites, and cross-country hauls. That identity, sturdy, grounded, proudly American, had been Ford's heartbeat. And now, in the middle of a digital high-gloss EV war, that heartbeat was starting to resonate again. In a market dominated by glass-roofed status symbols and over-the-air update buzzwords, Ford offered something different. A brand that still felt human. The Lightning wasn't a gadget. It was a tool. The Mach-E wasn't a spaceship. It was a car. For many buyers, that distinction mattered, because while flashy dashboards and quirky marketing campaigns had their place, there was still a massive segment of Americans who didn't want to feel like beta testers. They wanted to feel like drivers. Ford's vehicles didn't scream innovation. They wore it like work boots: practical, durable, capable. And that grounded approach, combined with expanding EV offerings, began to redefine what modern American transportation could look like. Ford didn't have to pretend to be something new. It just had to remind people what it had always been: a company that builds machines for real people. That resonance only deepened as economic conditions shifted. In an era of rising costs, shrinking patience, and distrust of tech elitism, Ford's approach became oddly radical. It didn't dazzle, it delivered. And in doing so, it began winning back something no amount of marketing can buy: belief. As that belief returned, so did a question that had once seemed unthinkable. Could Ford actually win this fight? Can Ford actually beat Tesla? It's not a hypothetical anymore. Ford has gone from a struggling legacy player to a legitimate threat in the electric vehicle war. And it's doing it without abandoning its roots. The company's future strategy hinges on a clear and layered approach. At the core is Model E, Ford's dedicated EV business unit, now laser-focused on affordability, functionality, and scale. This isn't about one-off hits. It's about repeatable, reliable success in a highly competitive field. By separating its electric division from Ford Blue and Ford Pro, the company gave its EV team the room to operate like a startup, with the discipline of a legacy automaker. Then there's the next generation of EVs, scheduled to arrive by 2026 and 2027. These models are not aimed at the luxury segment. They are engineered to hit price points and performance benchmarks that appeal to the mainstream. And unlike previous launches, these upcoming EVs are being built with lessons learned from the Mach-E and Lightning era. That means better margins, more efficient production, and vehicles that feel less like experiments and more like staples. Ford Pro adds a third dimension. Commercial fleets are quietly becoming the most important EV battleground in the country. Municipalities, logistics companies, and tradespeople aren't looking for flashy design. They're looking for uptime, cost savings, and serviceability. Ford's dominance in this space, combined with its ability to electrify work trucks and vans at scale, gives it a massive lead where other companies barely compete. The strength here isn't in any single model or feature. It's in Ford's system. A system of products, services, software, and support that doesn't just react to the market, it shapes it. And as competitors scramble to catch up, many are discovering something uncomfortable. Ford is no longer looking in the rearview mirror. Because what comes next won't be a race, it will be a reckoning. Washington's Charger collapse and Ford's power grab. While Ford was electrifying the streets, Capitol Hill was stuck in neutral. The federal government's much-publicized plan to fund a national network of public EV chargers had hit a wall. What began with fanfare, bipartisan bills, billions in grants, and ambitious timelines soon unraveled under the weight of bureaucratic friction, stalled permitting, and cross-agency gridlock. By the time Ford's charging network had expanded by over 50% in 1 year, Washington's effort had effectively paused. It wasn't just about delays, it was about missed signals. Ford had read the road ahead better than the institutions that were supposed to guide it. While policymakers debated zoning and manufacturing incentives, Ford was already stress-testing adapters for flood conditions and training new EV support teams across North America. The result, customers were plugging into a future that the federal roadmap hadn't even reached on paper, and Ford didn't wait for permission. It built its own infrastructure relationships. It tapped into third-party networks, invested in software-first tools like Ford Pass for real-time charging location access, and structured partnerships with Electron to control manufacturing timelines. As the federal initiative languished in pilot stages, Ford's ecosystem matured. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. A legacy automaker, long viewed as too slow to embrace the electric future, was now executing more decisively than the nation's own clean energy transition plans. Ford didn't campaign for change. It built it, plugged it in, and shipped it to people's homes. This wasn't just a missed opportunity for the federal government. It was a transfer of influence. The moment Ford proved it could move faster and more effectively, it began to quietly shift how policy might be shaped, from the halls of Congress to the blueprints of private enterprise. And to pull this off, Ford turned to a resource it already had, but almost no one saw coming: its dealerships. The dealer strategy no one saw coming. When most automakers looked at the dealership model, they saw an outdated relic. Tesla went direct to consumer. Rivian opted for boutique experiences. Even legacy players flirted with the idea of bypassing their dealer networks altogether. Ford, it did something radically different. It turned its dealers into a secret weapon. The transition was not immediate. It began with quiet investments in EV certification, training programs, equipment overhauls, and performance standards. Not every dealer embraced the change. Some resisted, others adapted. But the ones who did, they became the first true line of contact in Ford's EV revolution. Ford realized what most of the industry had ignored. Trust isn't built through a website or app. It's built through a handshake, a test drive, and a technician who lives in the same zip code as the customer. By reactivating its local footprint, Ford made EVs personal. When a customer picked up a Mustang Mach-E or an F-150 Lightning, they weren't stepping into the unknown. They were walking into familiar territory, updated for the future. These weren't just salespeople anymore. They were EV translators. Dealerships became hubs of education and reassurance. Staff knew how to walk hesitant buyers through home charging setups, the Blue Oval Network, Ford Pass interfaces, and how to navigate superchargers with the new adapter. Ford didn't just retrofit its showrooms, it retooled its frontline ambassadors. What's more, this was infrastructure no other company could replicate overnight. Tesla's showroom count couldn't match Ford's regional saturation. Hyundai couldn't match its community presence. General Motors couldn't match the speed of its training deployment. The irony? Ford's slowest asset had become its fastest-moving advantage. And now, with every dealer trained, every charger activated, and every adapter shipped, Ford is ready to take this fight beyond American borders. Ford's global EV move starts here. For years, Ford's international strategy had been cautious. Its European footprint was reliable but conservative. Its Latin American and Canadian EV expansions were in their infancy. But that caution is now evaporating, because with the successful US rollout of adapters, charging infrastructure, and home installations, Ford now has a repeatable playbook. And it's about to go global. What Ford built in North America isn't just a domestic success. It's a scalable system of trust, infrastructure, and execution. The NACS adapter program, the Blue Oval charging integrations, and the Ford Power Promise were designed to solve core barriers. Range anxiety, charger confusion, and cost of ownership. These aren't just American problems, they're global ones. And Ford now owns the blueprint. In Europe, where Tesla's brand is fading and Chinese EV makers are crowding the field, Ford's advantage isn't price or flash, it's predictability. If Ford can deliver the same home charger programs, dealership-driven education, and easy-to-use interfaces in countries like Germany, the United Kingdom, and France, it instantly sets itself apart from newer entrants. In Latin America, where range and charging infrastructure are deeply unreliable, Ford's mix of hybrids and EVs, paired with modular charging tools, becomes a mobility solution, not just a product. And in Canada, where seasonal extremes mirror the harsh environments Ford tested its Electron adapters against, it becomes a symbol of weatherproof, rural-ready electric reliability. This isn't just a product expansion. It's a branding escalation. Ford is leveraging its reliability, its middle-market reputation, and its sudden EV competence to position itself as the anti-fragile brand. The one you buy not because it's flashy but because it works. Globally, that matters more than ever. Ford didn't just catch up. It quietly took control. While Washington stalled and Tesla stumbled, Ford executed. Not with headlines but with hardware.